We don't keep an eye on them as much as we should, but our neighbors to the north in Canada are no slouches when it comes to kids' TV. But the closure of Teletoon is not just the end of one of the great bastions for the art there, not to mention the end of something so close to so many hearts. It's also an alarming development that puts into jeopardy the future of the genre, both there and here. I'm Benzie Johnson Jr. I'm enthusiastic about television, but this is the sort of video I was hoping I'd never have to make. Canada has always had a unique relationship with kids' TV, and its influential position in helping pioneer kids' TV as we now know it has perhaps been one of the country's greatest media successes. The 80s Canadian sketch show You Can't Do That on Television was a critical part of Nickelodeon's early rocket to prominence, and in addition to co-opting slime from that show, our homegrown orange friend has a long and continuing history with Canadian fare. Saturday morning network television, while it existed, and Cartoon Network have also had notable flings with the Great White North, and in spite of the pull of the US media scene, Canada is an important part of the kids' TV ecosystem. Their success is our success, and our success helps fuel their success too, given many studios north of the border have cut their teeth working on American productions. But enough about how we get to see CanCon. How does Canada get to see it? Well, in a market where domestic television is often more successful than domestic theatrical movies, Canada's fledgling animation industry set their sights on starting a cable channel of their very own. In October 1997 came Teletoon, a joint venture between the animation studios Nelvana and CNR, the latter later Cookie Jar and ultimately subsumed into what is now WildBrain, and Canada's two other kids' TV channels, Family Channel and YTV. Though I use that term out of convenience, as none of Canada's channels in that genre truly adhere to the rigid, restrictive concept of kids' TV by the American definition under which we know it. The channel's license initially required that 90% of its programming be animated, and 40% of it, and eventually 60%, to be Canadian. To that aim, the channel ambitiously planned to produce 78 half hours of original content a year to start with, the equivalent of 3 whole series worth, and by 2001, the channel had put $56 million into almost 100 original productions. That ambition continued throughout the 2000s and into the 2010s, helping usher in Canada as a place that delivers its own flavor of unmistakably unique animated fare. Among the many shows Teletoon has had their hands in over the years include Angela Anaconda, Atomic Betty, Braceface, World of Quest, Wayside, Sidekick, Skatoonie, Jimmy Two Shoes, the Total Drama franchise, and most of Johnny Test. More recently, they've put out stuff like Detention Air, the amazing show that is, Camp Lake Bottom, Raj Band, Packages from Planet X, Rocket Monkeys, bit of a personal favorite of mine, Dr. Dimension Pants, Atomic Puppet, oh my god, that was great. The Bagel and Becky Show, Freaktown, Looped, still a soft spot for that one too. Toon Marty, oh god, Toon Marty was such a great concept. DNAce and Wish Fart. Some of those last few I've reviewed for this channel. If you've loved, hated, or mildly heard about a Canadian cartoon, chances are Teletoon were the ones who first aired it. They've been an important avenue and means to keep Canadian kids' TV kicking, especially for animation fans. That's why it was so devastating when it was announced back in February 2023 that Chorus Entertainment, owners of Nelvana and YTV, among other channels, and sole owners of Teletoon since 2013, would be rebranding Teletoon as Cartoon Network Canada, effective March 27th. Cartoon Network Canada has already existed as a brand-licensed corporate sibling to Teletoon since 2012, first as its own channel, then as the regulatory successor to classic animation channel Teletoon Retro as of 2015. Overtaking Teletoon will now be its third channel position in 11 years. The channel currently operating as Cartoon Network Canada, the successor to Teletoon Retro, will be simultaneously relaunched as a Canadian version of Boomerang, though in keeping with its new namesake, it'll be more in line with the current state of the American channel rather than a return to its original form. The Teletoon name will nominally continue to exist through streaming service Teletoon Plus, rebranded from Nick Plus back in September and not to be confused with an unrelated TV channel in France, and the French language feed of Teletoon, which will not be affected. Not only does this development mark the effective end of a bastion of kids' TV in Canada, it also casts clouds onto the future of the genre, both in terms of what's available in Canadian kids' TV and what comes from it. Between YTV, the erstwhile Teletoon, and the rights to run local versions of all 3 major US kids networks, plus Disney XD, soon Boomerang, and the rights to ancillary non-network properties such as Power Rangers, Corus Entertainment has a near monopoly on kids TV broadcasting in Canada, and a complete monopoly outright on rights to US content, both since its full acquisition of Teletoon in 2013 and its acquisition of the rights to Disney programming in 2015, stripping that content from Family Channel and ending 27 years of history there. It's never felt the same since. As much as Teletoon has always been the Canadian Cartoon Network, lowercase, it's never felt so much like the Canadian Cartoon Network, title case, as it has over the past few years, seemingly content with filling its schedule with as much Teen Titans Go and Gumball as the regulations will allow. Enough to make the American network blush. Since sweeping regulatory changes in 2016 which discontinued genre protection rules and individualized channel license obligations in favor of standardized conditions of license for most pay TV channels, and especially within the last few years, Corus has seemed more interested in positioning their kids' channels as somewhat more blatant pass-throughs for American programming than previously feasible, rather than maintaining their character as unique brands outright. While YTV and Teletoon have long had relationships with Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network respectively, the amount of new Canadian programming added to that mix has appeared to take a considerable turn for the worse. The last new original made for Teletoon, both in terms of most recent and now last period, was DNA's in 2019. Admittedly, we had a pandemic in there, but YTV's aired 4 original productions since then. 3 of them, 2020's Ollie's Pack and last year's Super Wish and Best and Bester, were animated, and thus, theoretically, could have been under Teletoon's purview instead. Though YTV isn't necessarily restricted from airing animated programming, they aired Chuck's Choice back around 2017. Whether they would have fit tonally is a different story, but some of them already air on the French language feed anyway, owing to Corus's much smaller francophone operation. Even given all the regulatory changes, Teletoon has never technically been equal to the other 2 Canadian kids channels, YTV and Family Channel, in the way that the US Big 3 are to each other. Over a decade younger than the channels that helped support them, Teletoon was one of the last analog cable channels to launch in Canada, and even with the advent of digital services, some paid TV packages made Teletoon available on a different, higher tier than YTV and Family. I'm still surprised every time a Canadian reminds me of this fact when they talk about their viewing experiences growing up, given I'm so used to the American state of affairs and subconsciously applied that train of thought up north. If you want to buy into the usual PR spin about changing viewership trends and a challenged television market that always seems to get used for this sort of stuff, or whatever the heck that PR release from Corus was talking about, this distinction could partly explain, though not justify, Corus's apparent intent to focus on YTV over Teletoon, and reduce Elara to a Cartoon Network pass-through in an outright and official capacity. The other US-branded services, like Disney Channel Canada, are similarly higher tiered, though given their recency, it's hard to paint Teletoon as an anomaly, comparatively. No matter what your relationship is or how you feel about international kids TV or animation, we are all worse off, as viewers, through the demise of Teletoon and its official demotion into Cartoon Network Canada. I'm not suggesting that American kids TV shouldn't be made available to Canadian audiences. I'm just saying that I don't feel it should come at the expense of Canadians being given the resources to tell the stories that they'd like to tell, as they're a welcome and distinctive voice to kids TV as a whole. However, given it is almost always cheaper and more profitable to import a series than to make one of your own, Canadian kids TV is somewhat resigned to always being this zero-sum game. Canada's Broadcasting Act, a telecommunications legislation last updated in 1991, sets out a vision for Canadian media, declaring that it, quote, should serve to safeguard, enrich, and strengthen the cultural, political, social, and economic fabric of Canada. As much as kids TV is a small, far-flung corner of the landscape, compared to, say, local journalism or even journalist entertainment for adult audiences, the end of Teletoon and the slow death of its final years strikes me as a disservice to those goals, weakening the strength of Canadian television as a whole, and discouraging to an entire medium and the domestic creative industry that supports it. Given the current regulatory and corporate environment, however, it's hard to repair the situation without making it unpalatable for powerful local conglomerates, including Corus, who already have questionable relationships with domestic production as it is. The situation will only get more disappointing as more production power gets tied up in American or derivative franchises to fuel the expansionist media landscape south of the border. Certainly the likes of Netflix won't pay any mind to CanCon investment of any variety, and legislative attempts to force them to, in the same way as is gaining momentum in Europe, have been unsuccessful so far. Even sadder, it's not just Canada, not just this one channel in this one country. International kids TV is under threat on multiple fronts, jeopardizing the plurality and diversity we've previously enjoyed. Besides Teletoon, there's the coming closure of the UK's CITV and CBBC, that country's most prominent kids channels, and the eventual slide of France Télévision's provisions to online streaming, where it's far easier to invest far less and get away with it without suspicion. Don't get me started on Australia's languishing commitment to the genre, already effectively a one-player game as it is. Even if you're a relatively insulated American kids TV fan, you're sorely mistaken if you think these foreign affairs won't affect you. One of Disney Channel's biggest cartoons right now is a French import. Another show setting their lineups on fire is from Australia, about those lovable dogs. One of the big reasons any of us remember the likes of Johnny Test or Total Drama so well is because Cartoon Network was reliant on Canadian fare when its own production reputation hit a low point in the late 2000s and early 2010s, just before the era we now hail as a renaissance was fully realized. Animation and kids TV are already challenging and threatened propositions for countries like the US, where we have the economies of scale and potential audience to support a large industry. Yet, year after year, plenty of other countries punch well above their weight to deliver series that are just as engaging and just as well worth your time, if not more so, as anything we can cook up. It would be great if we used this moment of sadness as a time for pause and a time to broaden the conversation to better include and more visibly support the great concepts we've been seeing from international animation and kids TV in recent years. As the fall of Teletoon will soon show us, none of this is ever guaranteed, so we better be there for these shows when it matters, while it matters. As much as the loss of another identity, another unique voice in kids TV is already depressing, the loss of Teletoon, specifically, after all it's done to elevate and appreciate Canadian productions and kids TV, is devastating. And while Canadian screens may be trading one oblong box for another one on March 27th, the hole it leaves creatively may never truly be filled again. And kids TV at large will suffer because of it. Teletoon, just like your waning slogan, it's been unreal, and I don't have the words for how much I'm going to miss you. Hit subscribe for more commentary like this and all the latest from the world of television. If you want to get started on a Canadian adventure of your own after all this, I reviewed Teletoon's DNAs back when it came out, and you can watch that video up here or down in the description. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.